למען החי ורעי, למען החי ורעי.
Hello. Today we're discussing Parsha Pinchas. It's a very dramatic Parsha. It has got many aspects to it. And in order to understand it, we need to go a little bit back into the previous Parsha, Balak. As you remember, probably, I hope you do, Pinchas, in the end of the Parsha, Pinchas, in the act of zealotry, kills one of the leaders of the tribe of Shimon and Midianite princess Cosby, while they are actually performing a love act. They are copulating in a tent, which is in a public place. After Zimri actually contradicted Moses and Aaron and God and Torah by simply saying, can I live and take this woman, which was a Midianite woman, as a wife? And when Moshe said no, he said, but you took Zipporah, who is a Midianite woman as well. And that was true. And surprisingly, Moshe got a little bit confused and forgot the bare fact that he married Zipporah before the Torah was given. So the law didn't exist. Where now, after receiving the Torah, it's in place. So in order to stop the act, Pinchas pierced Zimri and Cosby while they were conducting the act with his spear. And it was the act of zealotry for God. And God basically rewards him, grants him a covenant of peace for this. And a priesthood. So he becomes a Kohen. The truth is that Pinchas, even though he was grandson of Aaron, he was born before Aaron became Kohen Gadol. And as a result of this, because the law was that only descendants of Aaron, after he became the Kohen Gadol, become Kohanim. So practically because of technicality, Pinchas wasn't a Kohen prior to this. However, God decided to correct that situation in reward for what he did. Then a census was conducted, and the count was 601,730 men between the ages of 20 and 60. Moshe was introduced on how the land is to be divided by lots, by lottery, among the tribes and families of Israel. And then, while this was taking place, preparation for the division of the land, the daughters of Zelophehad petitioned Moshe that they should be granted the portion of the land belonging to their father, who died without having sons. So there was no son, they didn't have a brother, they were just 5 sisters. God accepts their claim and incorporates it into the Torah's law of inheritance. Then Moshe empowers Joshua to succeed him and lead the people into the land of Israel. The Parsha concludes with a detailed list of the daily offerings and additional offerings brought on Shabbat, brought by people of Israel on Shabbat, Rosh Chodesh, which is the first of each month, on festivals of Passover, Shavuot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and Shmini Atzeret. Surely the debates and discussions about Pinchas and what he did and whether he was right and whether he was wrong, raging for centuries. And I think I discussed that last year. And so in order not to do that, not to repeat myself, and because I found something incredibly interesting in the articles of Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, and he has inspired me basically to look at the daughters of Tzelafahat part of this parsha. They asked for their portion on the inheritance of the land of Israel because they loved it, as did thousands of elderly Jewish women who outlived their husbands as a result of the spies story. You remember this, and the sin of the spies, when men refused to go into the land of Israel. In order to understand where I am driving to, I would like to tell you a modern story, basically, which I read on Rabbi Jonathan Sachs' website. It's a true story which took place in 1995. It concerns the legacy of an unusual man with an unusual name, Mr. Ernst Anians, a farmer in East Anglia. He was known as an eccentric, and his hobby was collecting art, collecting paintings. He used to go around local auctions, and whenever he saw a painting, particularly if it was an old one, he would place a bid for it. Eventually, he collected more than 500 canvases, and there were far too many to hang them on all the walls of his fairly modest house. So, he simply piled them up, keeping some of them even in the chicken shed he had around the house. His children did not understand his passion and did not share it, and have got no understanding of what those paintings are. They knew he was an odd man. He used to dress very scruffily, and when he died, the children put all the paintings on sale by Sotheby's auctions in London. Before any major sale of artworks, Sotheby's puts out a catalog so that interested buyers can see in advance what will be on offer on the next auction. One of the great experts, Sir Dennis Mahon, who passed away in 2011, was looking through the catalog one day, and when his eye caught an image of one painting in particular, and the photograph in the catalog was very, very small, the size of a postage stamp, but it showed a rubble and of rampaging people setting fire to a large building and making off with the loot, with some sacks and whatever, stuff. Onions had bought it at a country sale in the 1940s for a mere £12. The catalogue listed the painting as the Sack of Carthage, painted by a relatively little known artist of the 17th century, Pietra Testa. It estimated that it would fetch around about £15,000. Mahon was struck by one unusual detail. One of the looters was making off with a 7-branch candelabra. And Mahon was wondering, was the candelabra actually the menorah, and what it was doing in the Carthage? Clearly, the painting was not depicting the event, and instead it was a portrait of the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans. But if that was the case, So it wasn't the sack of Carthage. Then the artist was probably not Pietra Testa. So Mahon basically done some homework, and he found out that the great 17th century artist Nicholas Poussin had painted two portraits of the destruction of the Second Temple. One was hanging in the Art Museum in Vienna. The other painted in 1626 for Cardinal Barberini, and it had disappeared from public view sometime in the 18th century. No one knew what happened to it. Mahon realized that he was looking at the missing Poussin painting. At the auction, he bid for the picture, and when a figure like him, with his eminence and knowledge, he was Sir Denis Mahon, bid for the painting like this, the buyers knew that he must know something. They did not. So they were bidding too. Eventually, Sir Denis bought the painting for $155,000, much more than $15,000. So the children of the original collector, Mr. Onions, were probably ecstatically happy. A few years later, he sold it for its true value, £4.5 million, to Lord Rothschild, who actually donated it to the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, where it hangs even today. The moral of this story? Because it is so graphic and example of the fact that we can lose priceless legacy simply because not loving it. We do not come to appreciate its true value. From this we can understand that we inherit only what we truly love. This surely is the moral of the story with the daughters of Zelophehad this week, in this parsha. If we recall this story, Zelophehad of the tribe of Menashe had died in the wilderness, in the desert, before the allocation of the land. He left 5 daughters and no sons. The daughters came before Moses, arguing that it would be unjust for his family to be denied their share in the land simply because he had no sons, just daughters. Yeah, they are the first suffragettes, absolutely. Moses brought this case before God, who told him what Zelophehad's daughters are saying is right. You must certainly give them the property as an inheritance among their father's relatives, and give their father's inheritance to them, stated in Numbers 27:7. And so it came to pass. It was done. The sages spoke of Zelophehad's daughters with very high praises. They were, they said, very wise and chose the right time to present their request. They knew how to interpret scripture, and they were perfectly virtuous. Even more importantly, their love for the land of Israel is in striking contrast to that of the men of their father's generation. The daughters of Zelophehad, by contrast, did inherit the land because they loved it. What we love, we inherit. What we fail to love, we lose. As you can see, in some strange way, these stories of the daughters Zelophehad and the auction of the missing Poussin artwork illustrate the state of Jewish identity today. For many of my contemporaries, Judaism was like the story of Ernst Onion's penchant of paintings. Judaism was something their parents or grandparents had, but not something their parents or grandparents passed on to them, and it's not something which was meaningful to them. Like Anion's children, they were willing to let go of, unaware that it was a legacy of immense value. When we don't fully appreciate the value of something, we can lose a treasure without even knowing that it is a treasure. Naturally, Judaism, of course, is not a painting. But it's much more than that. It's our identity. It's who we are. And what you can sell, what you can't sell is your identity. But you can lose it. You can lose your identity. And many Jews are losing it today because our parents or maybe grandparents did not tell us about it. We know very little. And by the will of God, I simply found out that, there is something like this. And that Judaism is very logical. And no, it's not a dogma. And you can change yourself by studying it. Our ancestors have given us the gift of the past, which some of them, our later generations of our ancestors, did not quite pass to us. We owe them the gift of the future, faithful to the past, to our heritage, to who we are and what we are. At least we should not relinquish it simply because we don't know or we don't understand or we don't appreciate how valuable it is to us, to our hearts, to our minds, to our souls. I am having a debate with one very good friend of mine with whom we kept in touch on and off over many years. And he doesn't understand me. He's trying. I give him that. But he doesn't understand why I'm spending so much time and effort studying Judaism. And it's simply because I want to maintain who I am, my heritage, my well-being. And part of it is the desire to share the knowledge and feelings I have got with anybody who wants to listen, which is what I'm doing right now. The life-changing idea here is surely simple and profound. If we truly wish to hand on our legacy to our children, we must teach them to love it, to love our legacy, to what we are. The most important element of any education is not learning facts or skills, but learning what to love. What we love is what we inherit. And what we fail to love, we lose. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for listening.
השם אלוקינו אבק שטוב לך למען השם אלוקינו אבק שטוב לך למען בית השם אלוקינו אבק שטוב לך